I was always interested in music, but when my older brother brought home Heartbreak Hotel, as is probably um, a story that is similar to many others, it was a life-changing event, and suddenly there was music that seemed like it was for us and not for our parents. And I became an obsessive listener of rock and roll. And Elvis's guitarist, Scotty Moore, was someone who played with a pick, but also used his fingers. And he sort of had an orchestral style going. And then later on some of those records, you had Chet Atkins. And both of these people had a very orchestral, integrated technique in terms of how they defined the records that they were making. Uh, so that was an early influence in terms of thinking in terms of finger picking. A few years later, when the first wave of rock and roll started to ebb a little bit, I got very interested in folk music, and of course, the three-finger Travis pick is sort of a basic thing that you learn when you get into that. Um, I was also listening to some what you might call classical light, some pop interpretations of classical, which would add the third finger as well, and would also bring in maybe melody lines played within a finger picking structure. I picked up on the banjo because a lot of those groups were playing banjo, so I bought myself some finger picks and was playing bluegrass banjo, and that whole kind of roll, which is again three fingers, informs a lot of the things later, like World Turning, songs that are directly connected to that style of playing. So that's really about it in terms of what I can analyze. I am a player who was not taught. I consider myself to be sort of a refined primitive. I'm someone who does not read music. So because I learned by listening to songs and getting a chord book and played songs, it was always about the song. It also makes it difficult for me to analyze it too deeply or too technically. So all of those things were made up the bulk of how I played guitar. Now, when I got into a band after high school, I couldn't play lead. That was not part of my lexicon at all. And so I played bass in that band. And it was only after that band broke up and Stevie Nicks and I started thinking of becoming a duo that I started writing songs and added lead into my range. And by that time, I was not someone who was going to take to a pick very often. Sometimes in the studio, you use a pick for a specific application. But the fact that I play lead without a pick is really just an extension of my limitations, I think, if you want to look at it that way. When we joined Fleetwood Mac, Mick tried to get me to start using a pick, and it wasn't going to happen. So that's just the way it's worked out. Well, this is a song that Stevie wrote, and it was on the first album that Stevie and I were on with Fleetwood Mac. I remember that it had been sitting around for a while before we actually met the band. And so it was waiting to find a home. That's something that on a guitar level is not too mysterious. It's probably the most traditional in terms of application. And it was just one of those things that we wanted to keep very, very simple, much as we did later with Never Going Back Again. That would be a song which is analogous to this. But this particular song is probably the least complex, in terms of a picking style. It really adheres pretty close to a basic Travis pick through the whole song. There is a solo that goes over it on the recorded version, which is electric, and of course that when we do it live, that became something I integrated into the single guitar. But originally, it was really just like It played in a G, just.
The end of that was nice how you brought a little piece of melody in between the C and the B and the D G staying there.
That's right. Yeah, that's that little, the two notes staying the same over all the changes again. And again, I'm not sure, but I'm pretty sure that is not on the recorded version. That was something to make the live version have lift. So yeah, and that's that just worked really well.